Welcome to This Week in Habsland. I am Jordan, he's Brian, and we are here each Monday to discuss all things Montreal Canadiens. Find us on social media at HabslandPod on Blue Sky and TikTok. So Brian, as expected, this week the Habs dropped the easy game to the Columbus Blue Jackets and then kind of beat the doors off the reigning champs and the former champs in the double Florida games. That's what we all thought was going to happen, right?
Yeah, I definitely going into this week didn't think, okay, Columbus is beatable, but the other two teams aren't. That wasn't what was on my mind. But the way this team is playing, they could beat anyone right now. 8-4 in their last 12. Based on how the first 15 games of the season went, this is not what I expected from the Montreal Canadiens in late December. But
so if you've been watching the team all season through a patient and I would say rational lens, you could have seen this coming in some capacity. Now, the cynical take on it is, why were they not ready to be this team? Not necessarily for game one, because they won game one. But, for like the first month of the season, why were they not ready to be this team? Because this is not, look, they beat Florida and Tampa on a back-to-back on the road. That is certainly an outlier in the expectations of this team. But the level of competitiveness and how they are playing, that I think was the expectation coming into the season. So the cynical take is, why were they not ready to do this in October? Now, we're going to get into, I think, multiple reasons why, but the focus on the positive stuff is they've, I think, fully rounded the corner. You presented that stat about their plus minus, their negative. It was negative 26, something like that. But when you took out those 4 or 5 blowouts, their goal differential,
it was much more reasonable.
Yeah, it was much more reasonable. And I think now after these last few weeks, the last week or two, quite frankly, I'm wondering that number would be even more balanced right now. And you're seeing, right, like 8-4 in the last 12, depending on however you slice it. If you're kicking out the first 10, the first 15 games of the season, this is a team that is, I think, outpacing the initial expectations. We have been talking about this absolute death stretch that they have embarked on. And to start it off 2-0 is great. It would have been better if they had beaten the Blue Jackets on Monday night. And that's certainly a blown opportunity, and we can get into that. Like, they just lost their focus in the third period after grabbing the lead. But we really need to focus on the 2 games they just played against those 2 teams. And yeah, it's completely different team than what we were seeing in October.
And I'd like to venture a few answers to your why were they not ready at the start question, because I think that's a crucial one. That's a really important question to assess here. So youth, inexperience, those kind of go hand in hand. The Line A injury, the whole team was just absolutely psyched to have this gem on their team who's going to score a bunch of goals. And then, he gets injured in an awful fashion. And I don't think that the Canadiens regained their momentum at any point in the start of the season because of that. Mm-hmm. And then Primo is the last answer. And we're going to get into that. So I'll leave that on the back burner, but definitely that's a factor as well.
So that we're going to hop into our headlines in a moment, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Nikita Kucherov a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, let's get into it.
Suzuki knocking him down the first period, him complaining basically at any instant in the third period for absolutely anything. He is good on him. He is continuing to be such an unlikable player, and it was great to see him lose a game. Gotta say it.
Yeah, 100%. He's and you can quote me on this. Nikita Kucherov is a weenie.
Yeah. Oh boy.
You're one of the best players in the. Yeah. Sorry about the language there. Maybe get the bleep ready for for that one. But he is. I mean, you're one of the best players in the world, and you're whining to the refs about getting knocked down. Come on, pathetic. Pathetic. Play. Grow up, you child.
Every play in the third period, and even the refs were like, "This guy again. He's complaining again." Yeah. And because he has the superstar status, he's allowed to chirp a little, that extra 5-6 seconds that others galley can't.
Right. In general, though, the refereeing, refreshing to see playoff refereeing in the regular season. We had playoff refereeing in both games in the Sunshine State. Yeah. In Florida, in Tampa, they weren't calling the little stuff. In Tampa, they did more so. In Florida, I thought that was like, if you were to, which they'll never do because it would be the right thing to do, so that means the NHL will never do it. But if they were to make it so that the regular season and the playoffs have the exact same refereeing, that was the game to base yourselves on. Because it was not quite at the level of the playoffs where you can cross-check a guy in the neck, but it also wasn't like the little tippy taps on somebody's shin pads. You're not getting called for slashing. It was a nice, happy medium. And it's Wes McCauley, who isn't always great.
Mhm.
So, you know what? Give him praise. When praise is due, I'll give Wes McCauley praise. Absolutely. When the little stuff wasn't called at the start, he didn't then start calling it later. It stayed. Some referees in the first period, stuff doesn't get called, and then the game starts to get away from them because the teams think, oh, we can get away with anything. And so the refs start calling a bunch of stuff that wasn't called earlier. And then the players are like, well, where the hell's the line? I don't know where the line is. I don't know what I can do with my stick. I don't know how physical I can be. Instead, they just left it as is, and the players played the way that they can play, which advantage Florida, the way that Florida plays, and the Montreal Canadiens still weathered the storm and won that game. So kudos to the refs, kudos to the Canadiens for staying in it. And on the positive side of things, like we could list a bunch of things, but I also don't want to step on our headlines because there's going to be a bunch of positivity in our headlines as well. So unless you had something else on the games themselves, do you want to jump into that?
Just a little thing on Florida. Like we watch the Habs all the time. We watch Habs every game. We're not able to watch other teams as much. So it's interesting to hear the chatter about certain teams, and then you get to watch them up close. And when you're watching them up close, you know, attentively for a game, dive into some of the numbers, how certain players are going. And like the narrative on Florida is like, wow. And the Athletic just had an article on this. Like they are defeating the Stanley Cup hangover stereotype. And like, okay, sure, they're gonna finish first or second in the Atlantic, we think. But you just dive in a little bit to their goal differential. This is like super minutiae, and I'm sorry for people. Skip ahead a minute and a half if you want to hear happy Habs talk. Their goal differential is a +10. Brian, at 5-on-5, they're a -3. They are incredibly reliant on their power play, and they have like a wickedly awesome success with shorthanded goals. Now, ironically, they gave up a shorthanded goal to the shorthand sniper on Saturday afternoon, but that was just something I was like, oh, interesting. Like, okay, Florida's like, they're still great. Florida will still be there in the second round in game 6 against whoever is still alive in the Atlantic.
Yeah.
But again, it's perception of what you hear, what you read, what you listen to. And then you dive into it a bit more. And it's like, oh, they're really reliant on special teams. So to your point about the playoff calling, and that's what was happening. Yes. I was like, oh, interesting. Okay, cool. Interesting stuff with what Florida's doing. I have no doubt that they're going to be around in May, but and then you look at Tampa and their goal differential, and you're like, oh crap. Tampa is like on the other end of the spectrum where their goal differential is bananas. But the results, they're getting there with the results, not, Sunday night excluded. You're welcome. But yeah, it's just cool to see like those teams up close. We should probably move on. Let's go to our headlines. Headline number 1, Brian, it's, are we done with the roster whack-a-mole that the Habs have been on for the first 30 plus games of the season?
So you got to define this. I love this term, and we haven't discussed it prior to this. You wrote this in our communal document so that I would know what your headline was so we could prep. What do you mean by roster whack-a-mole exactly?
So, I mean, you talked about it a little bit about like, well, the Patrick Laine stuff was the first like domino. I mean, I guess David Reinbacher technically, but for the NHL team, for the competitiveness of the squad, Laine going out was certainly a blow. But there's been other things that Marty has been tinkering with, man, for the last 20, 30 games. And I really do think it's the sign of a healthy GM coach relationship when they're kind of working together to like, hey, let's fix this. And what we've been saying all year, like, what are the things that we've been, from a roster standpoint, like worried about? It's the third pairing of the defense. It's like Marty doesn't trust them. Backup goaltending, doesn't trust them. The first wave of the power play, it's been successful basically all year, but we thought it was a little smoke and mirrors early on, and then we thought the personnel wasn't quite perfect. And then even someone like Juraj Slafkovsky bouncing around, I was like, why is Slav on the third line all of a sudden? Like, what are we doing here? And I think in the past 10 to 15 games, it's like, okay, Patrick Laine is back, second line. Juraj Slafkovsky, back to the first line with Suzuki and Caulfield. Kirby Dach, you're back to center. Remember, that stopped for a while too. Yeah. Power play, okay. Mike Matheson, love you. Power play too. Lane Hudson, you're promoted. Caden Primo, like the nexus of this is Jakub Dobes coming in, but like Caden Primo, you're not cutting it out. You're not even playing anymore. And now Jakub Dobes has gotten the call up and was incredible. And we're going to get into it, obviously, on Saturday afternoon. And then the Justin Barron, Alex Carrier trade, where it's like, I don't trust this guy either. Get him out. So there's been a lot of moves on the roster, right? Like extra.
And Gooley going to the left.
Yes, thank you. I didn't even have that on my list.
Because Gooley went to the left prior to the Carrier trade, but now that Carrier is there, it's solidified. So it's kind of a two-part thing, but absolutely. And that we're probably not even exhausting the entire list of things that have had to change yet.
Yeah.
But certainly those are big ones.
So I'm wondering now, and also what we have to say, and like hopefully the mic picks that up, knock on wood, this is the healthiest the team has been in the entire Martin St. Louis era. In the almost 3 years since he has become the coach, this is the healthiest the team has ever been. Hopefully that continues. But even within that, there has still been moments like we talked about it last week with the Barron trade where it's probably like the GM and the coach were like, look, we have to figure this out in some way. And then Dobes and Primo is the same thing where you're swapping it out, and Hudson and Matheson swapping on the power play and Slav going back. Like, it's just been like, oh, we got to fix this problem. We got to fix that problem. We got a backup goaltender. Okay, what are we doing on the right side of the fence? Oh, per Caden Gooley there. I don't know. Like, it's been whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
It's been trying to, like, there's one issue after another on the roster, and it feels like it's calming down now with Jakub Dobes being, at least temporarily, the final piece of everybody can chill out now. This is the team. We can talk about Dobes, but like,
yeah,
is that do you agree with that assessment of the roster is now like going to calcify a bit, and this is what we're going to have likely for a while? Not even just in terms of the roster itself, but like the way the lines are put together, the pairings, the goaltending, one starter backup.
Yes. So I think this roster is going to calcify as is. I think that it's as good as it's going to get unless you start making GM moves rather than just moving stuff within the lineup. But I want to address the other question. Like, what are the holes what are the moles that remain here to be whacked? Right? Like, and I don't even mean long term. Long term, we know what the issues are. But just short term, just for the remaining 46 games that are left in this season, for the Canadiens to be as good as they can be, what needs improving? Right? To me, the defense is consistently solid. All three pairings, they're fairly balanced. Each guy is getting like the appropriate amount of ice time. The guys who are good on the penalty kill are on the penalty kill, and the power play guys are on their right power play. So D to me is fine. Whatever. Two lefties on the top unit, whatever. Hudson and Matheson, they're doing well enough. Goaltending, we have to wait a good 10 games or so to confirm it with Dobes, right? But he looks confident enough and certainly has the abilities to be a good enough backup behind Monty, who we know is a good starter. So like goaltending is good. At least it's better than it was, right? That's fine. For the forwards, I'm definitely less sure about where they're at, right? Like the most consistently engaged line is the fourth line. Evans, Heineman, Armia. No changes needed there. The third line is fine, right? Gallagher, Dvorak, Anderson. Galley and Anderson, they're playing their roles, and Dvorak is winning draws. Like I wish he did more, but he's winning draws, whatever. The top six to me is still not good enough at 5-on-5. At 5-on-5, neither line is really at the level we'd like to see. The Doc Newhook line I find especially in terms of like play driving, which is odd because I thought Doc and Newhook would be quite good at play driving together, but they haven't figured it out yet. No, Newhook scored a beauty in Tampa on Sunday at 5-on-5. He got himself open, got the pass from Matheson. Laine was the one who made the play initially. So like, great. We're seeing like little, glimpses of it, but we need to see it more consistently. And then both Suzuki and Caulfield, to talk about the top line, Suzuki and Caulfield have really high pace, and I just haven't seen Slavkovsky reach their pace yet consistently this year. I don't know what the matter is there. It's probably just growing pains. Like he did it last year. This is maybe just a delayed sophomore slump because he was injured. He's 20.
Yeah.
To sort of wrap this, am I being nitpicky, or are those really the issues, like the top 9 sort of thing?
I mean, first of all, just like put this in the category or the proof of advanced stats or not, even though we tend to rely on them on this podcast, like they are not the be all and end all. The expected goal percentage of our deathly fourth line, which is, I believe it's been touted as the highest scoring fourth line in hockey. Its expected goal percentage against Florida was 9%.
9%?
9%, less than 10. Because I will always check them. I'm like, okay, eye test showed me, X, Y, and Z happened. Then you double check and you're like, their shot attempt percentage was like 40 something, whatever. And like there's a lot of game score in the Florida game. They played a lot better than the advanced stat showed.
Right.
While you were talking about the third line, which again, I kind of take exception to like third line versus fourth line. When push comes to shove, I do think the Evans line is the true third line at this point, with the other line being 4. I was wondering, tell me if this is too mean, at least for this podcast, if we can retitle that line of Josh Anderson, Brendan Gallagher, and Christian Dvorak. And we call it the CBA line. It can be Christian, Brendan, and Anderson. And it's also the line that you're kind of stuck with because of their contracts. And you can't, they have to be on the NHL roster. Can we call it the CBA line? Does it work because it's 2 first names and 1 last name?
I mean, it's certainly better than calling them the 16.5 million fourth line.
It's a little wordy.
That's more mean. Yeah, it's a little wordy and more mean. So I like yours better for sure. CBA.
They're fine. They're okay. Good on Galley getting the empty netter. It's fine.
And you know what? That was all Anderson, though. That charge into the offensive zone.
Yes.
And to get that puck, lift the stick, be hard on it, and get it near the front of the net.
And I'm happy Anderson finally got his assist. It was he did a lot of work on what ended up being the Dvorak goal, but he got kind of chipped out on it.
You know who else got an assist? Finally, you talked about apples.
Yep.
Alex Newhook. Good for you, buddy. You got an apple.
So let's do the second line quickly. I have definitely seen, so coming back to, I sidetracked us, but bringing it back to the forward lines about like where are there still other holes. This is the best week the second line has had all season. Not even close. Kirby Dach looked better. He looked more engaged. They had consistent offensive zone time, which is, first of all, I'm still baffled that is not an easily attainable stat of just offensive zone time and or just time of possession. Like you'll see it every now and then. It needs to become more available. Eye test wise, it seemed like this was the best week that line had. I don't know if after the Columbus kerfuffle that line A caused, which I don't feel like getting into, but we can if you want to. They looked better. Newhook picked up his 2 assists, which I was really happy about. They're looking better. So like, is that still an issue? Yeah, of course. But 2 games is a small sample, but they're looking better. Slav is having his moments here and there. I will say, like, he's almost on pace for 50 points again. He's somewhere in that range. I do think him finishing between 55 and 60 is right along the lines of like what he's going to end up doing. Which is fine. For a 20-year-old, like it's still progression. More goals would be nice, but it's still a progression. And that, I think, was very well said, Jordan. I think it does answer my question of like, are there moles remaining? I don't think that it's the type of thing that you have to go outside of the roster to fix. I think the guys in the room and on the ice have to figure it out themselves. Yeah. So like to answer my own question about that top 9 thing, like Dvorak is here for the interim, whatever. Galley and Anderson, same thing, and they're doing fine. The top 6, they can figure it out. You're right. This was the best week for the second line. I said that they've been inconsistent. They haven't been playing at the level we'd like to see at 5-on-5, but they are improving. It's not like it's been stagnant. Yeah. So the difference here could come from within. To close the loop then on the whack-a-mole, like let's do some Jakub Dobes stuff before we move on to our next. We should, because NHL debut, shutout on the road against the defending champs. Literally cannot write a better script. I thought the Canadiens actually did a pretty good job of like him not getting tested too much in the first. Like they were very well, like it was a very well played. Actually, it was kind of a sleepy first period, which is just more of like, don't make hockey players play in the afternoon. It's always a dumb idea because the games tend to be very like, there's a lot of malaise, certainly in the first period of the game. That's nap time for hockey players. 100%. NHL players nap at like 1 p.m. 100%. But that kind of worked in Dobes' favor. I'm sure he was not needing a nap at that point. He had all the energy and all the adrenaline going through him. After those first like 10, 15 minutes, the Panthers became the Panthers again to an extent. He was great. He was absolutely fantastic. And I'm wondering if like, I'm still viewing this as a temporary thing where that Hughes is maybe potentially looking for outside help really when it comes to a backup goaltender. But there was like, this is the thing probably where Marty was like, I don't trust Primo anymore. And Hughes said, okay, let me figure it out. And after a certain amount of weeks, it was like, you have to give Samuel Montembeault some breaks because he breaks down every 5th game. And just that's where some of the blowouts are still happening. Yeah. So what did you think of Dobes' debut? I mean, like you have no notes because he played great and the team played great in front of him. Do you think this is he is the backup goaltender for the remainder of the season, or do you think Hughes will, I would say, continue to look for another option so that he can go back to Laval? It is really hard to say after one game, but I'd be comfortable with him based on his play in the AHL, based on this first game and the games we're going to see from him in the future. Like whatever, put a single grain of salt on this game because it's one game.
But what I will say, the biggest difference between Primo and Dobes was wanting the puck. When Primo was in the net, he consistently was in the back of the crease, like in his net, basically, when the shot is coming or the play's developing. And you could almost see him thinking or saying under his breath, please don't shoot, please don't shoot. Like he didn't want the puck. Dobes was out at the front of his crease, at the edge of his crease, ready, saying, give me that puck. I'm going to grab it out of the air and bring it down real fast, which, by the way, coolest glove save technique we've seen. Like Price is a god, right? Like Price is the uppermost echelon of nice glove save guys. But the way that Dobes has that spicy quick grab and bring it back down is really nice. I loved that. But the confidence that we saw from him and the want to be there, the want to be in the net, the want to get shots on him, I love that. And to me, that's a great sign. Like, that's not the sign of a goaltender who is going to get nervous and I've used this term about 1,000 times to talk about Primo, but shell-shocked. Primo got brought up young.
Yeah.
Got a lot of goals scored on him when the Canadiens were full of holes. They were Swiss cheese, had games where 45 shots were taken on him and about 6, 7, or 8 went in. And after a certain amount of those games accumulate on you, I think you just lose confidence to a certain degree. And I think that's what happened to Primo this year. Whereas Dobes is coming in with tons of confidence, tons of, swagger, you could say.
Yeah.
And he's also the type of goalie to like slash back at players in the crease. He's comfortable there. Like he owns that net. So I think it's his net as the backup. They're not going to call Primo back up, who, by the way, just to sort of tie the loop on Primo, he was waived on Saturday, cleared waivers on Sunday to no one's surprise. So he's going to play for the Laval Rocket for the foreseeable future. And chances are he'll play great there. He was always a good goalie for the Rocket. He had 908 or 909 every single season with them. And he's a little older now. He's been facing NHL shots. I wouldn't be surprised if he stepped in and started playing great hockey again. But does that mean he's going to get a call back up? Not if Dobes is playing well. So obviously, in terms of the play itself, we're going to reserve judgment on Dobes for probably, 10 games, 15 games, something like that? Like, you can't judge a goalie by a game or two. But at the very least, the confidence he showed in his first NHL game, incredible. And he's the first Habs goalie to record a shutout in their NHL debut since Yan Denis in October 2005.
Wow.
22nd goaltender in NHL history to do that. So that's pretty darn special, I'd say.
Yeah. That's amazing. To close the loop on it, like, I recognize that some people are a little apprehensive about, and I'll paraphrase other people's, like, it's not straw man, but like I've seen this posted everywhere of a little bit of concern about like making the same mistakes with Dobes that the Canadiens made with Primo. So we do have to mention with Primo, and Marc Dumont has mentioned this a bunch recently, that after his D+2 season, so his second year at Northeastern, Marc Bergevin convinced Primo to leave the NCAA, leave Northeastern, because he was going to be Carey Price's backup. And then, he wasn't, to be clear. In 2020, he was not Price's backup.
He was not.
He did make his debut, and like, again, it's the mismanagement of Caden Primo will be studied for a while. I do want to like contrast that with Jakub Dobes. Like, firstly, Primo was drafted in his first year of eligibility. Dobes was drafted in his second year of eligibility. So Dobes was already a year older at that point. Then Dobes has 1 more year in the USHL, 2 years in college, and then 1 full entire year last year in Laval, and then basically another half a year this year. So he's had 4.5 seasons since being drafted, which was 1 year more. So it's basically his D+6 season right now versus Primo, who made his debut in his D+3 season, right? So if you even look at their ages, like it's less than 2 years between the two of them. So I recognize that like people would be worried about Dobes getting 10, 15 games because you're like, no, let's not do this again. Let's get a proper veteran backup goaltender. I don't think the situations are that similar, but I understand. And I would be okay with it. If he was announced in like 3 weeks that, hey, we've traded for so-and-so as a backup goalie, thank you, Jakub, like go back to Laval and kill it there. I still think that would be a sound decision, but finding a veteran backup goalie that someone's willing to trade who's an expiring because Jacob Fowler's likely coming next year to Laval, like it's a little complicated.
And not only that, but there are playoff destined teams who need goaltending, who are willing to pay a higher price than the Canadiens would, who are in a rebuild, to get a goalie to give them, a shot at the promised land. The Habs are not going for the cup. You know,
Yeah.
look, I said it 8-4 in their last 12. If that trend continues, yeah, they are going for the cup. But in all reality, with this death stretch coming, they're not going to beat every great team the way that they beat, the two teams in Florida. So I think a contender would just offer more.
Yep. So went a little long on that first headline, but it was multifaceted. It was about the calcification of the roster and also Jakub Dobes. Brian, what was your headline for this week?
Well, one thing that hasn't needed changing on this roster, has needed no help, has been like one of the biggest shining lights on this team so far. Who are you and what have you done with Jake Evans? That's my headline, Jordan.
Yeah, I just posted this in the third period of the Tampa Bay game. Jake Evans walked into this week, we talked about it, with a completely unsustainable 25% shooting percentage. Brian, it's 31% now.
Yeah, keep going up, man. He'll be at 50 by like April.
It's completely unsustainable. It's like not even close. Like he's probably going to finish the season at like 14 or 15%. I hope we all know this, but it doesn't mean we can't have fun right now because it's awesome.
I don't know about that. Literally the only time he shoots is when he's on a 2-on-1 with someone he's not passing the puck to. He's looking that way. He's not even looking at the net, but the shot he's taking is going bar down.
They're all snipes.
Anyway, Jake Evans is on a 5-game goal streak, a 6-game point streak, 8 points in those 6 games, 5 goals, 3 assists. He's got 10 goals on the season. The best year he's ever had was a few years back in 2021-22 when he had 13. He's on pace now for 23. Pretty incredible. And the coolest thing about Jake Evans' season so far, check out this correlation, Jordan, because Jake Evans' play and goal scoring specifically extends to the team's performance. When Jake Evans doesn't score a goal, the Habs are 7-16-3. When Jake Evans does score a goal, the Habs are 9-1-0. They have more points in the 10 games when Jake Evans scored than in the 26 games when he didn't. 9-1-0 when Jake Evans scores.
All right, we'll put him on. Take Patrick Laine off the first wave, I guess, right? Make room for Jake.
I mean, I don't know. I called it a correlation. Is it coincidence? Yes. I don't think so. You're saying yes. Yeah. You're laughing and saying yes. But think about it this way. A guy who's not a goal scorer scoring a goal, sometimes on the PK, is there more of a dagger than that scoring on the PK?
No, there's not. And because he's so freaking good at it, just the penalty kill component in general. And now when he's coming down the wing, and he tends to go short side a lot, if you're noticing, it's still catching goalies by surprise. It's catching me by surprise. I don't even look anymore where the puck's going. I'm just waiting for him to start celebrating. Because now when he's on an odd man rush, I'm like, well, that's curtains, man. All right, just get ready for the next face off. It's over. It's been incredible to watch. His game has been very well rounded. I have been critical in the past, and I think accurately in some sense about like there's lots of limited offensive ability here in Jake Evans. His best offensive season was in the franchise's worst season in history, where he got just a truckload of opportunities on the second line. I did not think that he could become more than like a 30-point guy, 35 at his best. Certainly outpacing that right now. The stuff him, Armia, and Heineman are doing, like they are such pests right now. It's actually too bad the Canadiens are not a Stanley Cup contender, because that is a big pain in the ass fourth line to go up against in the postseason. It's 3 dudes. Like you have Jake Evans, a super smart center, decent on faceoffs, great on the penalty kill, and then 2 pain in the butt wingers that are, I mean, we saw it just recently in the Tampa game. Like they will literally bully you out of the way to get a 2-on-0. And the line's been working great. Again, I think it's more of like a third line, quite frankly, at this point. The Jake Evans stuff has been amazing. Brian, I have one more point on the Jake Evans stuff, which touches on something we wanted to get to later. Anything else on his form right now you wanted to hit on?
No, I'm good. I want to hear what you got to say. Like the 9-1-0 was my closer. That was my checkmate. So please.
No, that's great. That's I'll leave it for the next bit, which we're going to get into in a moment. But let's just like the part that we're not talking about yet. We'll put a pin in that for a minute or two before we come back to Jake Evans. But it's been really, really awesome to watch a guy who was a 7th round draft pick who had a good rookie year, a fine rookie year, and then in the 2021 playoffs, who knows what could have happened with that injury with the Scheifele hit. And then he's come back slowly. 22 good offensive year, terrible team. Now that he's having a better offensive year with a better team, to me shows how much better he's getting. And yes, he's in his prime. He's getting a new contract soon, and we'll get to that in part 2. So, part 2, let's go into it. We did this last year, Brian. We did, we do headlines now every week. But what we did last year around this time of the year was we wanted to make some predictive headlines for the upcoming calendar year for 2025. If we recall, I only remember one predictive headline from 2024, and that's because I pretty much nailed it, was Lane Hudson making his debut against the Red Wings. I believe I said he would score. He picked up an assist, though that's like 85% of the way there. But that's what we're doing. And I have these again, I have 4 headlines. I have put the date on them and the headline that is associated with it of what we think is going to happen within the next calendar year. So that means the rest of this season is in play. The rest of the 2024-2025 season is in place. Trade deadline, obviously, the 2025 draft, and then training camp for the 2025-26 season and the first few months of that season as well. So it's a blend of 2 seasons, but it's anything that could happen in 2025. Brian, I know you have 3. I have 4. I have mine in chronological order. I don't know if you do, and that's fine if you don't. So I'll kick us off. This is dated February 21st, 2025. Unfortunately, this reads, Team USA completes a dominant tournament with 4-0 shutout win over Finland of the Four Nations face-off final.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Look, we're not talking World Juniors. We will eventually. It just so happens that, and I hate the scheduling of the World Juniors, having Canada play a Sunday night game. Who are you? Why was there no World Junior game on Saturday night anyway?
Or Sunday afternoon so that kids could go watch. You know what I mean? No kids are on a school. I guess, you know what? It's Christmas break. But
it's still stupid.
Still.
Also, the final being at 7:30 p.m. on a Sunday. Idiotic.
Yeah.
So we're not talking World Juniors, but let's just projecting a bit. We've talked about Team USA being the favorites, and the way the schedule is set out for the Four Nations, I don't know if folks have looked at it, but the first 4 games, so the first 2 games of the round robin are being hosted in Montreal. And then the final match day, let's call it, of the round robin, the third one, is going to be held in Boston. And then the final, which is just the first and second place team, is also going to be held in Boston. So, meaning the final itself, Team USA will have, for all intents and purposes, home ice advantage. I know it might be a thing where they're the 2 seeds, so they might not get the last change. They're going to have 20,000 fans rooting for them. I think that will make a difference. But they have the deepest team. They have the best goaltenders. I think Finland is sneaky good, and I'm worried about Canada disappointing. So that's how I got to Team USA shutting out Finland. Feb 21, 2025.
Very interesting. I mean, my initial reaction was, yeah, that's going to happen, which might pull the rug out from under you because this is a relatively hot take. I don't think that when the rosters were announced, many people were calling a 4-0 win for the USA over Finland specifically. Mm-hmm. The part of USA winning the tournament, not the score, not the shutout, not beating Finland, that's obvious. Like that, it's Team USA's tournament to lose, which, crossing my fingers, but it's their tournament to lose. It's Canada's to, win, make an upset, try and surprise, but you might be right on the money with this one, Jordan.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, Brian, what's your first predictive 2025 headline?
So I do not have mine in chronological order. I have mine in order of importance, let's say. And my first one is also not a Montreal Canadiens one specific, but I'm going to talk about maybe one of the most important events to happen in hockey in our lifetime.
I think I know what you're about to say. And if it's the one I think you're going to say, you have to put a date on it.
April 4th, 2025. The Great 8 passes the Great 1.
Yeah. Okay. Thought so. So this season. Okay.
Alex Ovechkin is going to score his 895th goal to pass Gretzky, not to tie him, but to pass him for the most goals all time on April 4th. He's got 17 in only 20 games so far this season, counting the one he scored on Sunday. And even when he gets hurt, he roars back quickly as if nothing happened. So he that's not going to stop him. So I think he will do it this season. He needs 25 more, being at 870 right now. I picked April 4th because it gives him 39 games to score the last 25. That's a much lower pace than what he's been on this season. And that's kind of in line with what he's been on over the past few seasons. Mm-hmm. And it's against the Blackhawks in Washington, which should allow him to score more than one if he needs to. Chicago, after the trade deadline and in early April, should be just dumpster fiery enough to concede an OV clapper or 2 or 6. So
Yeah.
there's like, just in general, like to talk about Gretzky here as well, because obviously that's a big part of this. There's about 30 or so Gretzky records that will never be broken as far as I'm concerned. Not even close. Like the 50 goals in 39 games, his point total, single season record. Like there's so many of them. But to see his career goals record get broken will be one of the most monumental hockey moments to happen in history. So everybody set a calendar reminder for April 4th, and you will witness greatness. What do you think about this one? The Great 8 passing the Great 1.
The only part, well, I have a couple thoughts. I like how you're going with this year. I think Chicago's already a dumpster fire. They had a period this week where they gave up 4 goals and had 2 shots on goal. So they're mid-season form at absolute peak right now. It happened. I think it's going to happen this year too. If it doesn't, let's say he's like 5 goals off. I'm very interested.
This season, you mean?
This
right?
season,
You're
yes,
saying this season.
I don't know. I would love for it to happen this season. I don't know if it will. If it doesn't happen this season and it's happening into the next season, the 25-26 season, I'll be really interested to see how the NHL, ESPN, TNT, and Sportsnet agree to schedule the Capitals games. Because if he's 6 goals off to start the year, you're making sure as many Washington Capitals games as possible are on national TV against teams you care about. Like, they're going to make them play Pittsburgh 8 times in a row. Like, they're just going to put all the Sid versus Ovi games. They'll play a home and home and home and home. Like, they'll play all 4 of their divisional games in October. I would be very interested to see how they do that. It's definitely not going to be that aggressive, but I would put some shenanigans in there. If he's 5 goals off and I'm like, can I get him to Toronto on a Saturday night in the second week of the season?
Which, by the way, the Penguins is the Capitals' last game of the season, so that would be poetic. It's in Pittsburgh. I think it would be better if it was in Washington,
of course,
for the hometown fans, but whatever. But the Crosby-Ovi thing is incredible, and on April 17th, the Capitals have their last game of the season, so that would also be very special.
Yeah, I will say 2 last things on that. One is, you're right. Like, again, if it goes into next season, the Caps might just start the season on an 11-game homestand to make sure the game's at home. And what I will absolutely love that you will not get from, like, baseball had this, unfortunately, with the Ohtani home run where, like, it's been auctioned off. Like, when that goal goes in, like, Dylan Strom's just going to pick up the puck and give it to Ovechkin. No capitalism taking part in a really cool moment. Because that really bummed me out with baseball. It's the only sport you can't get that in basketball or in football because the ball stays in play. But in baseball, they lose the ball when there's a 70th home run, 60th home run, whatever.
Right.
Hockey will be the same. Just like Gally this on Saturday, we didn't mention it, but Gally obviously got the puck for Jakub Dobes after once the shutout happened. I like those wholesome moments in sports. Okay, second headline. This is the one I teased out earlier. Dated June 26, 2025, Evans and Canadiens extend contract prior to July 1st. This is a very hot button topic. Honestly, Brian, we probably should have talked about this in the first 10 minutes. This is getting more and more traction. What do you do with Jake Evans as the trade deadline approaches? Unrestricted free agent, in line for a lot of money. What I am finding very funny right now is a lot of people are saying, well, I'd sign him right away to 3 years, 3.5. And it's like, if everyone in like the Habs world, Habs Sky, whatever, like is agreeing with your take on what Jake Evans is going to sign, it means you're underpaying him. It means you're underselling it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought coming into the year, he could maybe max out like 12 to 15. Like, I'm going total dollar value is why I tend to start with these contracts. And then we start tinkering with the years. I thought like 10 to 12 was kind of the zone, which is 3.5 makes sense, right? 3 years, $3.5 million a year. I think we're getting closer to 20 at this point. And like, I think the Canadiens coming in with like 4 years, 4.25, 4.5, and Evans trying to get that extra year. Because I think if you offer Jake Evans 5 years and north of $4 million, he's saying absolutely yes at this point.
Yeah.
And that'll be the battle. But I do think they'll come to an agreement. I think the cap's going up. I think a contract that like you would prefer 4 years because there's a lot of flexibility in that. And it's going to be before our Russian phenom needs his contract extension. And who knows what Hudson's next contract will be. Like, there's much more important contracts to sign. But you need some Kirby Dach insurance. You need someone to be your third line center. It's still super important. It's not the third most important position on the team, but it's still like top 7. So
sure.
I think they'll do it. I think they'll re-sign him. I don't think they'll trade him. I know you don't want to trade him, But remove your heart from the equation if you can. What do you think the right play is?
So I actually disagree with you on this one, Jordan. I don't think he's going to get re-signed by the Canadiens just because the price tag is that high. Because here's the thing. Look, if you believe that Jake Evans' season this year in a career year is replicatable over his entire contract, whether that be 4 or 5 or even 6 years, like, you know, to bring him to like age 34, I guess. If you think that that's going to happen, yeah, sign him to that. Absolutely. I don't believe that. Not to slight him, but he's in a career year. Players always play better in a career year. I'm not saying he's going to go back to scoring 4 goals and getting 12 assists and just being good and not great on the penalty kill. No, he's going to be great on the penalty kill until he loses his speed, probably around age 33, maybe something like that. So that's roughly the end of the contract anyway. But he's not going to be scoring at this pace every season.
You're right. No, of course.
Is that a fair assessment? And not only that, but he might even want to try the open market. I assume he likes Montreal. I assume he wants to win here because he's been here a long time and he got close and was an integral part in that run where we lost to Tampa in the final. Like he was a big part of that up until obviously the awful injury. But until then, he was crucial in that. I just don't know. I think another team would offer him more. I think that the Canadiens are in a position where obviously center depth is not and has never really been a strong suit in our lifetime, but we do have Owen Beck coming.
Yeah. 3 things maybe to add to this. One is people will try, I think in the next, well, I think they're already trying, but in the next 3 to 6 months to like downplay how much Jake Evans is worth. Jake Evans, you deserve every single dollar that is offered to you. And you hold no hard feelings if the Canadiens offer him a $14 million contract and he takes the $18 million one, he has earned every single penny. Flat out. Number 2, we were in a similar situation with Phillip Danault a few years ago. And the worry was, man, how the heck are you going to replace Phillip Danault? It took a couple years. We have Jake Evans. If we're going to ask the same question now, we have Oliver Kapanen, we have Owen Beck, we have Michael Hage, which Hage is probably projecting at this point, certainly a little bit more offensive. But in terms of depth down the middle from prospects, I think the Canadiens are in an okay spot. The last thing I will ask you, and so the first 2 were comments. This is a question to you on this point. If at the trade deadline, there is no offer that includes a first round pick or an equivalent prospect, like let's say it's 2 seconds, do you take that? Or do you just say, no, we're going to try our luck for a few more months to re-sign him? Or do you just take it? Like if it's different, if there's like a first on the table, I think. If it's like, it's the 21st pick in the draft, or like it's going to be a Winnipeg pick, or it's going to be a Minnesota pick or something like that. But if the preferred offer is not there, like he's cooled off, he's not at 31% anymore, but he's still garnering attention. It's like a second and a fourth or a second and a third. Are you still moving him if you can't get a contract extension? Because they're obviously going to, I would assume that's what the plan is. Offer him the extension 2-ish weeks or up until about 2-ish weeks before the deadline. And then if you don't get it, you're going to set a price. And if that price is not met, what do you do?
So if he already has said no to the contract that the Canadiens are willing to offer, and we get to the trade deadline and there are offers and one of them is 2 seconds, I think you got to take it. Okay. A second and a fifth, let's say, maybe it's not as worth it, but this might all be moot because honestly, even if he regresses in the shooting, what he brings to the table defensively, a team is willing to pay a first for that.
Yeah, it might be
no doubt in my mind. There's going to be a team. Like I almost made a headline, and I had a bunch of teams. I had Dallas in this, Colorado, Winnipeg, Vegas, like a bunch of Western teams. Edmonton. I couldn't pick one, and I knew we would talk about them anyway. So I had one prepared of like, the Edmonton Oilers win the Stanley Cup with Jake Evans, again, like a Lehkonen style thing of traded at the deadline and is a crucial piece of that team winning the cup. Like I almost did one of those. I think a team is going to be interested in him. I'd be very interested to see how many other very good, like elite level defensive centers are going to be on the block at the trade deadline. He might be one of the best options for these teams, maybe the best. So he will garner a first round pick if this continues and if he stays healthy.
That's the Jake. It's going to be fascinating. And as long as it works out for him, honestly, I'm fine. If he's the third line center going forward, I'm good with that. I don't think Beck's going to be ready next season. So roll the dice on 4 years. If you get a 5th year, I start to get worried. Anyways, let's go to your second predictive headline.
I say we get a little bit quicker with these just because we're getting to our time. relatively fast. So I'll go pretty quick on this one. January 3rd, 2025, about a week from now, Cole Caulfield scores his 100th goal, Jordan.
Oh, this is such okay, listen, if you don't get what period is this in?
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's fair.
We're going with the long change in a second. How are we doing this? Early off in the game?
I'm going on the power play 15 minutes into the third.
Okay, I have a lot of follow-up questions, but yes, because of time I won't. Him scoring a power play goal will be important.
So that's the thing. That's what makes this a little bit of a hot take.
Yeah.
Now, to say he's been cold is unfair because most players in the NHL don't score, in half of the games that they play. He's got he's got exactly half, I think, right now. 18 goals, 36 games. So that's pretty darn good. 41 goal pace. We will absolutely take that for Cole Caulfield. Now, when he was at the 80 goal pace at the beginning of the season, and everybody was screaming and excited, we knew this would regress. But I think that he's still got a lot of how to even put it, like gusto left in him. I think that he's hungry at this point. I think that Laine coming in, and I'm not putting it solely on that, but I think Laine coming in and taking the spotlight away from Cole Caulfield and being this guy who scores 8 in 9 on the power play and is just absolutely lethal. He literally took Cole Caulfield's best scoring spot away from him. He literally did that.
Yeah.
So that's why this one is kind of important to me, that this pseudo drought where Cole Caulfield is sitting in the high 90s for weeks on end after he scored a bunch of goals to start the season. I think it's important that he gets the 100. He just puts that behind him, gets the monkey off his back, and starts scoring a little bit more consistently. Now, the 5-on-5 stuff that we discussed at the top, I don't have to get into again, but when Slavkovsky starts upping his pace, I think that the goals at 5-on-5 will come as well. But they need more versatility on the power play. We said that from the top. And if and when that comes and they figure out a way to make Caulfield as dangerous as Laine is, that's when this goal is going to come. And I think 2 games from now, that's when it's going to happen.
Okay. All right. Someone had to grab that low-hanging fruit, so happy you did. Third headline for me, September 15th, 2025. Hughes sets playoffs as goal for 2025-2026 season. In the exact same way he said they wanted to be in the mix at the golf tournament beginning of the training camp this season, Ken Hughes is a smart dude. He's going to say playoffs. He's going to say the word. We're all going to freak out, and we're going to dangle it over them for the entire season. Yeah. 100% they're doing this next season, unless something really catastrophic happens and they finish with like 62 points or 68 points. At this point, they're closing in on the 80-point pace we all believed that they would play at. And we got 45 games or more than that to go. So we'll see. But for right now, I'm very confident and they are going to set playoffs as the goal for next season.
They need to end the season 80 plus points, and they also in the offseason need to figure out the center stuff because Dvorak is leaving. They're not re-signing Christian Dvorak. They need a left-handed center. It's a shame that Pittsburgh turned things around because for a while I was thinking that guy might be Sidney Crosby, but I think that ship has sailed at this point. So anyway, that's my spiel about, what would have to happen for the Canadian. Like they need to figure out the center depth. Once they do that, he can make all the claims he wants and the Habs will probably at least come close to delivering, mid-90s team next year if all goes well.
I think 2 things on that before we go to your last headline. One is that it's definitely a positive feedback loop. The Canadiens play better towards the end of this season. It'll show Hughes and Gordon, okay, they're ready for us to keep investing in them from a trade standpoint, from a player standpoint, from a free agency standpoint. They're going to be like, okay, they showed us they are ready to take the next step. The same way they're like, here's Patrick Laine, have fun. They're going to, I think if the Habs are like, let's say it's 86 points. I'm being weird, crazy, whatever. 86 points. They're finished 11th in the conference, whatever. I think that's enough for Hughes to be like, okay, cool. I am ready to now start, phase 3, whatever it is of the rebuild. And then the second piece is, and we're getting to him, Ivan Demidov's coming.
Yeah,
that's exactly. That's just free money, right? Like there's skill coming. Anyways, I'll hold off my Demidov take for another 3 minutes. Brian, what's your last headline?
I'll do this one quick because we've been seeing the proof in the play of the Montreal Canadiens lately that this will in fact happen. April 16th, 2025, Habs win and end 24-25 season at NHL 500, 6th in the Atlantic and 10th from the bottom.
Okay.
Now, a month and a half ago, like you might say this is low-hanging fruit because that's roughly where they are. They're 1 game back of NHL 500. So, check. Assuming they continue playing well, check. 10th from the bottom, that's roughly where they are right now. They might even be exactly that. So you might say low-hanging fruit. But based on the play at the beginning of the season, and based on the fact that probably we're going to be sellers at the deadline, and we have this depth stretch, I think that gives this a little bit more credibility. And the 6th in the Atlantic nugget is kind of fun because, yes, that's where we are right now, but who would have expected that? Now, would that be detrimental to the rebuild, as Tank Nation would have you believe? I don't think so. I think we've acquired the necessary pieces to make this a team to be reckoned with for the future. I won't call it a dynasty, but they have that potential, and they will be a team to be reckoned with when all these guys are at the appropriate ages.
And detail to add there, if it's the 10th pick and they get Calgary's, and let's say it's 10 and 15 or 10 and 17, it's pretty good. Again, like we've done the trade up in the draft stuff. It's fairly difficult to get into the top 5, especially with the way the top 5, top 6-ish is shaping out. Like there's a pretty big drop off once you get past like Mertone and Hagens and Misa and all those guys. Like I think it's 5 or 6, and then it drops off pretty well. So like, 2 shots at the end of the lottery. I'll take it. I'll take it for a team that has potentially a 40 goal scorer in Cole Caulfield, that has Lane Hudson, who's making his way up, and Nick Suzuki, and hopefully Kirby Dach turning the corner, and Uris. Like the guy we're gonna get to. Like I'll take 10 and 16 and a positive trajectory throughout the season for the guys actually on the team. Last headline. I played around with this one a little bit. I'm going to go with October 8th, 2025. Ivan Demidov dazzles in debut. First of all, I actually think this could be the exact title because editors love alliteration. They just, Demidov dazzles in debut. They just can't help themselves. I think he's getting 2 goals and an assist in his debut. I'm putting numbers down.
Wow.
I think he's going to come out the gates flying. Look, since the Habs brass went over to Russia, he's been getting game time. He has 4 goals and 3 assists in his last 5 games, getting a lot more ice time. In terms of points per game, for age 19 KHL players, he is tied for 7th all time. Now, I do want to mention, like, there's some greats in there. There's Kaprizov in there. Kuznetsov is in there. Unfortunately, well, not saying that unfortunately, but like Nail Yakupov is in there. Matvei Michkov's previous season is in there as well. One guy who I believe, Brian, you brought up when we were doing our draft coverage, Nikita Artamanov, who unfortunately went to Carolina at the end of the 2nd round.
Yeah.
He's right in there in the same line, with the same amount of points per game as Ivan Demidov. He's getting a bit more ice time. He's getting 13, 14 minutes. Demidov still averaging about 10. So he's going to come over. We all know what's going to happen. It's basically guaranteed. He's going to be on the Habs, and it'll be curious to see who he's paired with. I think that's another reason you want to keep Jake Evans around. Like, Slav, Caulfield, Laine, that's 3 of your 4 top 6. Whether or not St. Louis immediately trusts Demidov to be in the top 6, we'll see. If he doesn't, which is fine. It's totally okay if Ivan Demidov starts the season on the 3rd line. You kind of want a good 3rd line center at that point. And I think just in general, like, not to turn this back into Jake Evans, but if Evans and Dvorak are gone, it can't be Owen Beck and Oliver Kapanen as 3C and 4C next year. It just can't be. You can't have 2 of your 4 centers be rookies, and then you're trusting Kirby Dach or Alex Newhook to be your 2nd line center. You need that extra little bit of padding, which is the Evans point again. I think he's going to be great immediately. We've seen it this year with St. Louis. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie. He is going to give you ice time if you have earned it. Now, you might fight me a bit on that with Heineman, but with Lane Hudson, you wouldn't, because Hudson's playing 22, 23 minutes a game. Yeah, yes, Heineman can be playing more, but it's a little bit more difficult to like find some space for him, based on how the lineup is. But
and his style of play is very conducive to that 4th line. 3rd line, as you said earlier, like that might actually be the 3rd line, the forechecking role. He's great at that. He's throwing the body around at all times. He's a pest, so he's kind of perfect for that role. So yeah, maybe he deserves a little more ice time.
Yeah.
But he's also perfect in the role he's at. And the guys in the top 6 you'd have to bring down in a swap are not good in that bottom 6 role.
Exactly. Yeah. Alex Newhook went fair that well, I think, in the bottom 6 role. So those are our predictive headlines for 2025. Notice that we didn't put in a Leafs 1st round headline because we needed ones that were actually a little bit difficult to maintain. You called the Caulfield 100 goal very specifically. We called Demidov's debut very specifically. The Leafs one, it's not a challenge. So we're not going to even bother putting it there. But yeah, we'll see what happens in 2025. That'll be the last episode, obviously, for 2024. We thank everybody for listening. Hope folks have had not too bad of an early start to winter, and the holidays have gone well. And as we jump into January, we got a lot more hockey to look forward to. Obviously, Four Nations is coming up in Feb. But for the time being, that'll do it for this week's episode of This Week in Habsland. You can follow us on social media at HabslandPod on Blue Sky and TikTok. And if you like what you heard, feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Until next Monday and next year, go Habs.